Hi, I'm Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have a special guest. She is the author of several books, no other than Miss Sylvia Araya. Welcome to Book 101, Miss Sylvia, and can you please introduce more about yourself?
Thank you. It's great to be here. Yes, I was born in Costa Rica, but I live now in the US. My background is in psychology. However, I started to get other certifications and learn about other frameworks and techniques. So I'm also certified as a trauma specialist. I am also a yoga teacher specialized in trauma and also IFS facilitator, EMDR, and all of that because I specialize in panic attacks and anxiety.
Wow, so let's talk about trust and live without panic. And can you greet our Spanish people listening to us? I have a lot of listeners in Spain. Can you greet
Yeah,
them
so
in
yes,
Spanish?
hi. Hi, hola a todos, hola, muchas gracias por estar aquí.
Muchas gracias, Spain, for listening to this podcast. I have a lot of places in Spain. So, what is the central focus of panic healing?
Yeah, so this is my first book and my first little book, and it started because I was suffering from panic attacks while I was studying psychology, actually. And so everything that I couldn't put in my thesis, I put into this little book. It wasn't meant to be a book in the beginning. I thought it was just going to be something that I could give to my clients and my patients at the time, but then it started to look more like a book, and then it got released. So it tells a little bit of my experience with the panic attacks, and also some of the tools and some of the knowledge that I gain and that I use to heal my panic attacks.
So, how does the book define panic and its impact on the mind and the body?
Yes, that's a very good question. So panic is when basically our nervous system gets completely overwhelmed, and then it's like this alarm that it's going off. Basically imagine like the smoke alarm in your house, in your building, just starting to going and making very loud sounds, and it's telling us something is happening. And that's basically a panic attack. It's something telling us that something is wrong, something is it's happening, even though it's not really an emergency. So again, it's because the nervous system is overloaded, and then the alarm goes off. So basically that is a panic, and it comes with several symptoms, and it's different for every person.
What are the main techniques or practices introduced for managing panic?
The main one for me, at least, it was working with my inner child. It was healing my inner child, because part of what is in panic, there's a lot of trauma, especially trauma in the early years when when we're children. And I speak about that in the book. I speak about my own trauma as a child. And so my main tool and my main technique was working with my inner child to help her to heal those traumas that I had when I was a little girl. Then, after that, I also recommend people to know their nervous system and know what calms them down. So, for example, could be breathing, it could be meditation, could be nature, could be connecting with other people, that helps a lot, and different things that are going to help us to again regulate the nervous system so it doesn't go off like the alarm.
Yes. Definitely. How does the book explain the root causes of panic disorders or attacks?
So there are many variables here that it's important to know. There's not just one cause. So there's a part that it has to do with, our genetic, it's hereditary. So there could be a predisposition. It doesn't mean that you're gonna have it, but there's a predisposition to develop anxiety and panic attacks if your parents had it too or had some anxiety. Then there's also trauma, like I mentioned. So imagine we have a soup, and then in the soup, we're starting to put more and more ingredients. So one is genetic, the other one is trauma, the other one is whatever's happening around you, the way you were raised to see the world. So, for example, I also had a very tragic way to see the world taught by my parents. So everything was terrible. You have to be always afraid, always worried, always something bad can happen. So that also gets in there in that soup. And then on top of that, if we have a lot of stress in our lives, if we're living also outside of our purpose, if we're doing things that we really don't like, that also helps to create the conditions for anxiety and especially for panic.
So, panic behavior is hereditary.
There is a part, yeah, there is a part that is, it's hereditary. It doesn't mean, however, that everyone is going to get it because, for example, I have a sister and my sister didn't develop a panic disorder, even though we have the same genes, we have the same parents. But again, there's also parts of our personality or traumas that I lived and she didn't live. And so that made my body, my mind, my thoughts to develop in a different way. And thus, almost like a pushing a button for the gene to go on.
What role does breathing play in a panic healing?
It's very important because the breathing, it's very close together with our heart rate and also with our nervous system. So if you master and you can um, learn how to breathe better, breathe deeply, breathe slowly, you're basically helping your body to calm down. However, when you're in the middle of a panic attack, sometimes that's very difficult. It's very difficult to control your breathing because at that point, basically your front lobe, the part of your brain that thinks and makes decisions, it's no longer there. It's out. So we can't think straight when we're having a panic attack. So it's very difficult for us to remember what to do in those moments. So I often tell people that you want to learn the breathing techniques and you want to practice them when you're not having a panic attack so that that muscle, like going to the gym, that muscle is developed, and then that's going to help you when you have, if you have a panic attack.
Definitely. Very well said, Miss. Very well said. And I give you a big, big hand. And how can mindfulness or meditation help reduce the frequency of panic episodes?
It helps a lot because mindfulness will help us to uh, get some interception. Interception is when we start to connect with our bodies, when we know ourselves enough to know, for example, when the soup is getting too full, right? Remember the idea of there's a soup and we're putting more ingredients into it. So when we have mindfulness, a mindfulness practice in our lives, we start to realize when things are getting a little too overwhelming, and then we can start to decrease that. So it helps us to manage our stress or manage whatever is happening in our lives that is creating anxiety. That's one thing. The other is that it helps us to know in the body where's the tension, and that helps too to reduce anxiety and panic, because this is very important. People think that trauma and anxiety and panic, that's in our head, and that's not entirely true. Part of it, it's in our bodies. We store emotions in our muscles, in our organs. So having the mindfulness practice helps us a lot to connect with the body again and connect with the present moment where nothing is really happening. We are safe. Meditation also helps because it starts to create different patterns in our brain, different thinking patterns. Even brain waves change when we meditate regularly. And that is the opposite of what happens in a panic attack. In a panic attack, basically everything just goes out of control. Whereas in meditation, you start to get a nice rhythm and your thoughts start to space out. And that's exactly what we want. So these two practices are very important to cultivate. Basically, it's going to be like a place where no weeds can grow. That's exactly what we want. We want to create a nice nice place where no weeds, no bad things can grow. That's what meditation does. So if you do it regularly, this is actually going to keep your soup nice and clean. And then if something happens, which can happen, it helps you to bounce back easier and faster. So it doesn't mean that because you meditate, you're never going to get stressed or you're never going to get panic. It just means that you will bounce back faster and you'll know what to do. So both of these practices, again, don't try it when you have a panic attack because it's going to be very difficult. Try it on a daily basis when you're feeling good.
Definitely. No weed, people. No weed. So, how does the book address the relationship between stress and panic?
Yeah, so it tells exactly how stress basically is. You have that soup and it has all kinds of things in there. It's already full. And then the stress, imagine like is if you put it in the fire and then it starts to boil. That's the stress. So there is a relationship between living in a stressful life, living in a way that doesn't resonate with you. That is going to create eventually anxiety and panic, because anxiety and panic, it's telling us something is not okay here. Remember what I said in the beginning. So if you're living in a stressful environment, you're living in a way that doesn't feel good to you, anxiety and panic are going to come to tell you that something needs to be changed. And we are not meant to live in stress constantly. We can live and have stress every now and then. Our nervous system can handle that, like the suspension in a car. Our nervous system can do that. But imagine always having bumps. Eventually, your suspension is gonna not work properly. So that's what happens when you have a lot of stress, constant stress in your life. Obviously, it's not going to help your nervous system. And then you're going to have more episodes of anxiety and panic.
What lifestyle changes does the book recommend for individuals dealing with panic?
So I speak about various techniques because I feel that every person is different. Every case of anxiety and panic is different. So I give options so that every person tries and tests what's better for them. So, for example, one of them, like I said, is working with your inner child, healing your traumas. Another one is practicing mindfulness, meditation. Another one is also watching your thoughts, because thoughts can trigger also fear and panic in our lives. And also another one that we haven't talked about, and it's spirituality. So not necessarily religion, but spirituality. So having a spiritual practice, a spiritual tradition helps a lot also in panic and anxiety, because it makes us feel protected, makes us feel safe, makes us feel that we're not alone. So whatever your spiritual practice is, and again, it could be from walking in nature, that's spiritual practice, to meditation, to believing in something bigger than you, all of that is going to help you, and also believing that you're going to be okay. So hope is also very important inside your spiritual practice.
Are there specific triggers that the book helps readers identify and manage?
Yes, I actually put an example with two graphics on the book. So one is a tree, and I tell people, like, imagine if your inner child, or that part of you that gets scared, goes up on a tree. And when it's up there, it starts screaming and saying, help, help. It's going to be very hard to bring that child down from the tree. It's easier to help it when the child is about to go on the tree or halfway through the tree. That's easier to bring it down. So the same thing with our thoughts. If you just let your mind run and think of all the tragic things that can happen in your life, it's going to be harder to bring yourself down. So start to monitor the way you think. If you're always thinking in tragic ways, then your emotions in your body are going to believe like a ladder. Like I also have a graphic in a ladder, and I say, if you have a thought, then an emotion will follow, and then another thought, and then next thing you know, you're going to feel like you are really living in a horror movie, even though the movie is not real. So if you monitor your thoughts, you're going to bring yourself down easier and faster. The other one that I say in the book is, imagine a maze, a labyrinth. And every time we are put in the maze, we're learning something new. Eventually, you will learn to cross the whole labyrinth, right? And then it doesn't matter, every time you get put in front of the labyrinth, you know it, you can cross it. That happens too when you're faced with a challenge in your life, something that you're scared, like a phobia. And every time you do it, you're building a pathway in your brain, and you're creating more trust in yourself. So the more you do it, the more confident you will feel. The first times it's going to be difficult, but the more you do it, you'll be like, it's okay. I know the way. I can cross it. And then you'll cross it really fast. It won't matter to be in the labyrinth anymore.
What role does self awareness play in the healing process for panic?
Yes, and again, I think the connection with yourself is very important, to be always aware of your thoughts, your feelings, your body. It's very important because, again, you're working to heal yourself. No one can heal anyone. You can heal yourself. So it's very important that you have a connection with yourself. Anxiety, panic, trauma makes a disconnection inside of us. We stop trusting ourselves. We stop trusting the world. And so that's partly why I named the book Trust and Live Without Panic, because we need to regain trust in ourselves. We need to regain trust in the world so that we can live a life without panic. So self-awareness will help us to come back to our bodies, to come back to the present moment, and realize that yes, maybe something bad happened in the past, but right now we're safe. Right now, nothing bad is happening, and I can come back to feel what I'm feeling.
Miss Sylvia, does the book offer advice on when to seek professional help for panic disorders?
Yes, it is very important that you know that you don't have to do this alone. And part of what creates panic sometimes, it's abandonment or some trauma about rejection or abandonment. So actually connection will be very important to heal that wound. And so I talk about creating a network of people around you that support you. And part of that is a professional. So it is important to know that if your life is getting affected severely by panic attacks, you should seek for professional help. You should seek for a therapist, a psychiatrist, whatever it is that you feel that you need, because you don't have to do this alone. And also, it when it starts to affect your life, your job, your relationships, it's time to go and seek for help.
Are there specific practices for healing panic in children or adolescents?
That's a very good question, because it wasn't so frequent when I wrote this book. For example, it wasn't so frequent to see it in adolescent and in children. Unfortunately, now we see panic and anxiety more in children. So I would say the same practices but modified for children can be done. So children can meditate, children can learn how to be self-aware and interoception, what I said, talking about knowing what's happening in your body. Children can learn that. Even the inner child um, framework that I talked about can be taught to children. In this case, we talk about the inner baby. So a child might not have an inner child, but they could have an inner baby. And so what I say is the little baby is the one that is scared. And so what do you want to do? What do you want to say with the little baby? And they're amazing. They say, oh, the little baby needs a hug. And so I said, okay, so hug the little baby. And obviously they're doing that with themselves. So all these practices can work also for children and adolescents. And it's important, again, that you seek for professional help, and that the little child or the teenager feels that they're not alone, that they don't have to do this alone.
So, Miss Sylvia, what would be your advice for those people out there suffering from panic attack?
My main message is know that this is not dangerous, that you will not die from this, and that you're not alone and you're not the only one. And the reason why I say this is because I remember feeling like I was going to die from this, that it wasn't going to end, that out of this something else could develop in my body, another disease or something very very bad. And the truth is that no one has ever died from panic attack. Nothing can be developed from panic and anxiety. Know that from this condition, you're only just going to feel uncomfortable. it's just it's just feeling uncomfortable, but you're not in danger. So if you're suffering panic and anxiety and you've already ruled out any medical conditions, you're not alone. You're going to be okay. This will end, and look for help and support.
What is your short term and long term goals in writing?
My short term and long term goals, personally or professionally or with the book, can you be more specific?
In writing, yes. In
Oh, in
writing,
writing. I see.
yes.
Thank you. Um, I well, short term is that this book actually is getting a revision, because it's been a while. So actually for 2025, I'm going to release this book, but in a better version. So it's going to have more information. It's bigger. It's updated. It has new things that I've learned throughout the last few years of practice. So that's my short-term goal, will be to release this book in 2025, but in a with a cosmetic surgery. And long term, I would like to keep writing. I'm drawn to write about other topics as well. So I'm going to write about trauma, and I'm going to do also some children's book and that have to do with anxiety. So those are my long-term goals, and maybe a novel maybe might be on the way.
Looking forward for that novel, Miss Sylvia, and good luck for your goals.
Thank
Again, Miss Sylvia Araya, thank you so much for sharing your talents to the world. And I'm encouraging you to do more and more and more. So,
thank
Miss Sylvia, can you please invite our listeners to support all your books?
Thank you. Yes, you can find all my books on Amazon. And you can also visit my website, sylviaraya.com. You can find there all of my books. And if you like them, they were helpful for you, please leave a review and share it with other people.
Muchas gracias, Miss Sylvia Araya.
Gracias.
Gracias. More to come, people. See you soon. I'm inviting you again next year, Miss Sylvia. I'm fully booked for